In the last episode, Benny Sisko had an exploding Cardassian ship on his watch, and shortly after being fiddled with by a guy in a Starfleet uniform. Rather than the expected response, we instead got a visit from Gul Dukat, who said he wanted to help Sisko solve the problem on the quiet. Why? Because the peace treaty between the Cardassians and the Federation was very favourable towards them, and he doesn't want to risk buggering it up. At least that's the impression we're given, and it's partly backed up by the opinions of Cal Hudson, the guy in charge of helping Federation colonies who now find themselves in somebody else's territory. They're getting the shitty end of the stick, violence against them by their new authorities being a regular thing. Starfleet doesn't want to know, though, as the concerns of a few space farmers aren't enough to risk upsetting the Cardassians with anything more than a strongly worded letter. That's why they've taken matters into their own hands with things like blowing up ships. They're of the opinion that such vessels may be arming the Cardassian colonists, a scheme unofficially backed by their authorities. When the exploding ship results in a tortured confession and murder, they decide maybe kidnapping Dukat might be a jolly jape, all of which results in Sisko tracking them down and discovering his old buddy Cal Hudson is actually a member of the Maquis, the name this group is now calling itself. Let's rejoin them for what will likely be a very awkward conversation indeed. Hudson's decided a Starfleet uniform isn't for him anymore and hands it back over. Seeing all that the settlers have done here and how the Federation stands impotent as others try to take it away has made him reconsider what matters. He can't prove the weapons being used against them are supplied by the Cardassian authorities, but that's what Gul Dukat is for. A suggestion from Sisko that they go to Cardassia to find the proof without all this unpleasantness is declined. What would that even achieve? More strongly worded letters? Hudson trying to recruit Sisko, largely so the Maquis can use DS9 to repair their ships, fails. Maybe he should have asked Kira instead. It's an impasse for which Hudson has no answer, so he just poops yellow at them all, then buggers off. Stun only, of course, but it'll give them time to get away. It's all kicking off on DS9 when they finally get back. A Cardassian legate is on the way to talk about the kidnapping of Gul Dukat, and an admiral from Starfleet is already here. She wants this problem solved and thinks a quick chat with them will make them see they're being terribly silly and stop all this nonsense. She also asks for Hudson's opinion, causing Sisko to answer non-committally and not mention that he's a card-carrying member of the Maquis. The meeting serves to prove only one thing to Sisko, that Starfleet Command are completely out of touch with life outside their own little bubble. At least a little rant about it gets Kira back on his side. That'll all have to wait, though. A call from Odo reveals that he's nabbed one of the kidnappers' associates. Quark's interest in Sakona might have been potent, but it's not enough to survive being told that she's wanted for kidnapping Gul Dukat. He claims ignorance of her intent, something made slightly more difficult to believe when he details all the hardware she wanted. He also shares that she was in a bit of a hurry, something he thinks suggests those toys will be used in the near future. 2 meetings down, 1 to go. What you'd expect to be the hardest actually turns out to be quite simple, albeit very surprising. This is Legate Palm, and for those who are trying to keep track, he's yet another member of the Babylon 5 crossover gang. He's also here to tell us that we shouldn't bother looking for Gul Dukat. See, he says Dukat and some other officers were responsible for supplying Cardassian settlers with weapons, something the governing body of their military totally didn't know about, honest, so they think having the Maquis kill him is the same as doing it themselves. Smells like somebody's being made a patsy, and both Kira and Sisko seem to agree. On the plus side, they've now got confirmation from an official that Hudson was right about those arms shipments. Despite all this, things in the demilitarized zone are refusing to settle down. Some Federation settlers have done a dead retaliation for the kaboomed ship here at DS9. That will give the Maquis a reason to hit back. Just as well, then, that O'Brien's been tracing the course of the ship Sisko tracked down to see if it met up with any others. The answer is no, but it did pass a few planets that can support life, so those are good places to start looking. We're in a cave, presumably on one of those planets, and Sakona is failing to do brain shenanigans with Dukat. Cardassians are trained to keep secrets, and officers doubly so. The guy who attacked Gul Avec wants to have a go, only to be stopped by the arrival of Sisko. Attempts to reason with the Maquis don't go anywhere, not least of which because Dukat forces a confrontation by starting the fight himself. Pooping ensues and a little grabbing by Odo, the result of which is a rescued Dukat and some subdued Maquis. Odo takes all but the guy who wanted to do a bit of torture away, as Sisko has a plan for him. He's sending him back to Hudson with news that Starfleet hasn't been told anything yet, and all of this can still be solved peacefully. Back to the station we go, and Dukat's having a nice relaxing meal to celebrate being rescued. The meal soured somewhat by Sisko arriving and, after some sparring, telling him that his own people sold him up the river and blamed him for the arms shipments. An offer to find a way to end those shipments in exchange for Sisko sorting out the Maquis is a good deal for Dukat. He'll clear himself and take credit for stopping the Maquis too. That this will also likely shit on the person who shat on him is a bonus. And so it is that we find him involved in a staff meeting to decide our next move. Just as well, really, as we don't have anything to go on. Sakona is resistant to interrogation, and the other prisoners we captured didn't have speaking parts, so they can't tell us anything either. Union rules. With that avenue blocked, we turn to Cardassian weapons instead. Dukat doesn't know who would be carrying them, but thinks he can guess based on who would make the most reliable smugglers. They're so stealthy, in fact, that we've never heard of them before. We found a freighter with the help of Dukat, but it's not answering our calls. It's also resisting scans, so we can't simply have a look for ourselves. Pooping in their general direction gets their attention, but that's all it gets, as they refuse to let us come over for a quick shufti. Dukat's bored now and just tells them he'll kill them if they don't comply. They're confused at being threatened by a Cardassian, what with them having been paid to smuggle weapons for them and all, so give in to his demands. Progress is being made back on DS9 too, and by Quark of all people. Sakona still isn't talking to Odo, so Quark hits her where it hurts, right in the logic. If the Maquis aim is truly peace, then that should be sought at the earliest opportunity, an opportunity such as the Cardassian authorities being caught shipping weapons and withdrawing their unofficial support, something that'll make their settlers think twice about conflict. More fighting only serves to give them a reason to claim rearming as a defensive measure, further prolonging the conflict, and that, he says, is the opposite of their stated goal. I'd argue he's left a few variables out of that equation, but it's enough to convince her to share the Maquis' plans, and Sisko's sharing them with Dukat. According to their data, there's a Cardassian weapons stash hidden on a colony, and they're going to go kaboom it. Sakona doesn't know where, so that's Dukat's job to find out. He may be a pariah right now, but he still knows some people he can blackmail. While he does that, Sisko's off to see if he can stop the attack before it starts. There's a meeting already in progress when he arrives, this one to try and address suspected sabotage of food replicators. Phasers, it would seem, are but the most obvious weapon in the Cardassian arsenal. It's not particularly surprising then when his speech about anybody who continues to fight being an enemy of the Federation goes down like a uranium zeppelin. Hudson and some associates arrive to hear the end of it, something Sisko had anticipated as he's brought Hudson's Starfleet gear as a chance to come back. Hudson's opinion of Sisko's position isn't much better than the others. As far as he's concerned, this is already a war, and the latest casualty is his uniform. Dukat has come through with the location of the weapons depot. That gives us a chance to intercept the Maquis before they get within range of the colony, something Kira and O'Brien thinks will provoke a response from Cardassia. We outnumber them, at least according to Sakona's data, though that doesn't take whatever upgrades they've added into account. Still, that's what we've got to work with, so off we go. The Maquis ships turn up just as Dak starts wondering if they've delayed the attack. Talking goes as well as it did on the colony, and we move on to tractor beams. Hudson doesn't care for this and starts pooping yellow, so we return the favour. One ship each gets hit and taken out of action, and Sisko sends the spare to help, leaving us with just him and Hudson. Another exchange of fire knocks out Hudson's weapons and Sisko's engines. Hudson decides there's not going to be much of an attack without any shooting, and moves to withdraw. There's just enough time for one last chat between them, all while Dukat tries to convince Sisko to shoot him. It fails, and Hudson bids him farewell, then leaves. Dukat's miffed, of course, but he can stuff it. Sisko's held up his end of the deal. We've just enough time left to mop up. Dukat's departed for home, presumably no longer a wanted man, if he ever was. Our mega shuttles will be fixed shortly, just in case we need them in the next episode, and Sisko's been commended for stopping a war before it started. Well, restarted. He's not so sure he's done anything more than kick a can down the road, so we'll leave him to consider whether a different path could have provided a more permanent outcome, until the next adventure. And so ends the uneasy alliance between Sisko and Dukat. Well, maybe alliance, as we shouldn't overlook the possibility that Starfleet has been played. There's a chance this whole thing was orchestrated, Dukat having a plan to make us take care of the Maquis, whilst also discrediting future reports of Cardassian attacks. A little embarrassment is worth having the Federation turn on its own. When you step back and think about it, Cardassia is very much the winner from this whole debacle. And a debacle it is. Sisko's meeting with an admiral shows just how utterly disconnected from reality Starfleet Command can be. She simply cannot envisage a time when she herself would stoop to taking up arms without the proper forms having been filled in first. As Sisko points out, it's because she spent so long living in a world without struggle. This is something that I've banged on about for ages, back when we were looking at Voyager in fact, that the Federation's morals last as long as its meals. That's not a potshot at the Federation, but a statement of reality. If you think the folks you see every day would have acted any better, then you must not have been paying attention when people started panic buying toilet paper of all things. Nothing provokes action before logic quite so well as a bit of fear. That's why it's so favoured by a certain type of politician. Come to think of it, that principle might tie back into what I said about this possibly being a Cardassian scheme. The idea of Federation civilians becoming a terrorist group is exactly the sort of thing that would inject fear straight into the brains of prim and proper Starfleet admirals and Federation politicians alike. That carefully maintained facade of moral superiority is a source of great pride, some would say vanity, and anything threatening it would be a potent motivator. If even a schlub like me can see that, then I'd imagine the idea would have occurred to those who organise schemes for a living as well. I suppose we should touch on the difficult part then. Do Hudson and the Maquis cross a line by going on the offensive? Well, yes, but the more important question is whether that crossing is justified. Blocking a punch from somebody attacking you might solve the immediate problem, but it's not going to prevent the next one. We've already seen that the Federation is unable or unwilling to intervene beyond words, so what options remain? Even Sisko has sympathy for the situation despite stopping it, describing Hudson as somebody trying to defend his home. It's the same point we touched on in the last part. Cardassia's seen no pushback against past attempts at nefarious shit. Stopping such things without punitive action gives no incentive to not just have another go. All you've done is taught them a lesson in how to not get caught. A bloody nose, then, might have given them pause. Of course, it might also have provoked an overwhelming response, but when you're getting killed anyway, what do you have to lose? One thing I know for certain is that the Federation is as much to blame for this whole situation as Cardassian aggression. An unwillingness to address the reality of things on the ground plays no small part in how this progressed, and I find it difficult to condemn the actions of those who've been failed by the authorities charged with protecting them. Let's end with something a bit more silly. There's a scene in this episode where we get a look at the difficulties of working with skin paint. As Gul Dukat is eating after being rescued, we can see the thumb of his hand is significantly more pink than the surrounding skin. I presume the juice of whatever looked and sounded like fruit has washed away whatever they were using for pigmentation. On a related note, I read that the episode Profit and Loss, which has Quark necking with Professor Natima Lang, suffered from similar issues. Rubbing orange paint against grey paint is not the best way of keeping either of those colours the way they need to look on camera. Consider this then to be a follow-up on what I said last time about prop makers. We'll add makeup artists onto the list of unsung heroes whose work contributes to making a fictional universe that much more convincing, and who also have to deal with whatever problem gets thrown at them from further up the chain. End of episode.
Had any decent offers?
There was a guy who wanted us to move a load of sauce.
Sounds easy enough. When do we start?
We don't. He was only willing to pay us in self-sealing stem bolts.
What kind of dickhead would accept that as payment?
The only other job I heard about was exterminating voles, but, frankly, they scare the piss out of me.
Fair enough.
What about you?
A lass in a way that wanted us to blow up a school, but I don't fancy making things go bang on a space station. Feels like the sort of thing that hasn't really been thought through.
Nothing else?
Well, there was one more, but we're not doing that.
Well, hold on. What was the job?
Look, I don't want to go into it. Suffice to say that Morn is a dirty little bastard. Woof.